Hey everyone, my name is Stephen Jewenmall. I am the Communications Manager at Bradbury-Sullivan LGBT Community Center. I use he, him pronouns, and our special guest today is none other than Bill McClin. Do you just want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm the Interim Executive Director here at the Bradbury-Sullivan Center. I use the pronouns he, him, his. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Stephen.
Yeah, amazing.
And you?
Yes, and all of you. So this isn't just a conversation between Bill and myself. We encourage you, if you have questions, to share them in the chat. We also want to make sure you know that in case you aren't able to join this live conversation on Facebook, we'll have another live conversation, but that will be on Instagram at 3 p.m. Eastern. And of course, there are other ways to get in touch with Bill and the center, and we'll share that later on in the conversation. But hoping some people have joined, and I want to kind of get right into it. So I want you to first tell us a little bit about yourself with your connections to Lehigh Valley. So what makes this home for you, and how have you spent your time here?
Okay, so I've really lived and worked in the Lehigh Valley for over probably 19, 20 years now. Started out, I was commuting, we had a home up near the Delaware Water Gap, and I would commute down here. I was working for the Bon-Ton Store Corporation as a divisional sales manager for years. And then I needed to find purpose again, besides making money. And so I applied for and was able to convince the Da Vinci Science Center, which at the time was known as the Discovery Center of Science and Technology, which was a startup that spun off of Lehigh University over on the south side, to bring me on as their first development director. So that's how I really became part of what I wanted to be a part of, the community of resources and enrichment. And so I started there. I helped raise the capital to put up the building that now is situated on the corner of Cedar Crest College. Helped get that building up and running. Really got to know the community through that work, and had made a lot of relationships and extended partnerships that I developed through my work with the Da Vinci Science Center. And then I had this 7-year, but it was really an almost 8-year itch that I'd reached a place where I needed challenge again.
Yeah.
And I ended up being able to join the Muhlenberg College advancement team as their director of corporate foundation and government relations. And that and the Da Vinci Center were two of the richest work experiences I've ever had. Always challenging, but also, they stretched me. They made me come up against boundaries and have to really face those in a positive way about how do you overcome boundaries. So those are my two, and that was my real investment.
Yeah.
Was that work life.
Sure.
We've lived in downtown Allentown for 17 years now, this summer.
And we
being my husband, we will celebrate 40 years together this summer. Amazing. Yes, we look at each other 40 years. We were legally married 9 years ago by a New York State Supreme Court judge in the State Supreme Court building of New York City.
What a moment.
Which was quite the moment, yeah. That picture on my wall is of us on the steps just after this State Supreme Court judge who married us. So anyway, yeah, but this is home.
Yeah.
This is, people always ask, I retired 2 years ago, May, from Muhlenberg College, and people were asking, well, are you going to stay here? And I said, I don't even think about leaving, because of all the associations we have here.
There's something about the Lehigh Valley that I've noticed, even in my few years here, that there's just a charm or a spark that keeps people here for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think you've explained that pretty well.
Yeah, and I think part of it too for us is we've always, except when we had this house up near the Delaware Water Gap, we've lived in New York, and I've always lived in cities growing up, and I much prefer the kind of tenor and the resonance of a city because of the diversity of the people it attracts and sort of the sound of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could never, I just couldn't live in a suburb or just,
Yeah.
not comfortable with that environment.
I hear you. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I
Yep.
completely agree. I spent some time in New York as well. I want to talk to you about your connection to the center. So obviously during your time at Da Vinci and Muhlenberg and in the Valley in general, I imagine that you crossed paths with the center in many different ways. Do you mind talking to us about that?
Yeah, well, the first time I really crossed paths with it was really right about when the building had been bought and Adrian and Liz and Trish were busy. I think Liz organized over 300 volunteers to prepare the building for opening.
Yeah.
The painting, the floors, all the kind of polish before they could open. And right about that time, I was at Muhlenberg and I was involved with alumni relations and trying to form an alumni affinity group for LGBT alumni. And for an alumni weekend, had organized an affinity reception. And I'd invited Adrian because he's an alum of Muhlenberg College to come and be part of it. And that's when I met him, but that's when I really got to know him because I spent most of my time in that affinity reception with him, and getting to know more about their vision here and the things that they were going to do. And it was in that meeting also that he convinced us, my partner and I, to marry, to protect ourselves. Anyway, from that, I got to know him better, and then I started to volunteer here, I think it was 4 years ago, for their first gala. And then that brought me into the fold, and I started then volunteering, as I say, working for Matt Easter, who's our director.
Fabulous director of
development.
Yep.
Or I like to say advancement. I think that's a more powerful word, advance. And then that I got inside of the organization and just started to appreciate everything that was going on here, and just found joy working here, and doing anything I could to advance what was happening here. So yeah, it's been a really rich time of my life to be here.
I would say that you're a super volunteer before you stepped into this role. Interim executive director. Talk to us about how that was something that you were considering. You were enjoying retirement.
I was.
So what
brought you out? I was at the gym 2.5 hours a day. I have a beautiful patio garden. I bake, I can, I entertain, I was enjoying it. My days were full, and then working here too.
Sure.
That was part of it. But then I got a call, I think the week that Adrian had told the board that he was going to move to another center, and I was in the car, and I think I was coming back from the gym, and he called and said, "Oh, Bill, it's Adrian." I said, "Oh, hi, Adrian." He says, "I have something to talk to you about." I said, "Oh, well, let me pull over." And I was glad I pulled over, because then he told me he was going to be leaving, and my stomach dropped out, and I mean, happy for him, but I admire him. I love him, and he was a mentor in a lot of ways to somebody like myself. So anyway, I went home. I told Mark, my husband, and then the next day I went to Mark and said, they're going to do an interim director, and I said, I think I'm going to put my name in the hat, just because I've been working there. I'm on the inside. I know people. And I told him that one of my concerns was that somebody could come in that doesn't have a relationship internally, and that how destructive I think that could be. I've been through a couple of presidential transitions and executive director transitions, and sometimes they work, and then sometimes they don't. And my concern was that somehow I could be a steward, I could work alongside everybody, be a problem solver, keep everything running, maybe do some new things within the context of what's happening. And so anyway, Mark questioned me
of course,
for a few days.
As any good husband would.
Right. But then I called Adrian and said, if they're going to do this, I'd like to put my name forward to them the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got an email requesting a resume, a cover letter, and references, and there was an interview process.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
You know, I think there's certainly a benefit to being on the inside and having, during a time of transition, you know, that inner knowledge that kind of keeps everyone afloat. And certainly when you were announced, I was very excited because I've known you as a friend before you were in this position. To have you leading us during this time is really, really valuable to us. But now that you're in this role, I'm kind of curious where you see the center. You know, as we move forward, it's a new chapter for us. We just celebrated 6 years in our building. Our centerversary.
I love the way you framed that. Yeah.
And I know that you were a huge part of that capital campaign to fully buy this building.
Pay the building.
So you know, we are a mortgage-free center.
Yep.
You know, we have new leadership. We're in the process of finding that new executive director.
Right.
But you know, this is a very critical time in our center's history.
Yeah.
Where do you see us going?
Well, I think real deep visioning is going to happen with all of you and the board and this new director, whoever that person may be, because I think that'll excuse me, that'll be part of what that person will bring. Some background in doing that, envisioning, strategic planning, you know, that kind of thing for the next chapter. But for me, I think part of that is expanding already recognizable services and programmatic pieces that have recognition, you know, both in our immediate community, but in the state, nationally, and that those things will only grow as we expand those audiences and our ability to serve larger audiences. And then there's some things we're working on here that I started working on as a volunteer, which is this Pride Cafe that will be coming into the front of the building, a renovation of a very large space for a sober, safe space. That will open as an idea of a drop-in, or you know, there'll be programmatic pieces like open mic nights, poetry, whatever, readings, book readings, music, and part of that's going to be really enhancing our youth program. We're talking about that. We're starting to look at other partners and not just have a drop-in center for young people, but also have an academic and business training and employment opportunity that would be run through the Pride Cafe. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Because I think we can expand the vision we have for our youth, our LGBTQ plus youth, from drop-in and some counseling and some sort of supportive services to then also professional, intellectual, you know, I won't say spiritual, but I think that's the inner part of a person that thrives by feeling empowered by what they do. And so I think that to me is my next, I can't wait to work even more on that, but we're working on it now. So that'll be my next thing, working for Matt. I mean, to finish that off, because we're really close.
And this is new information for everyone. You know, this is something that's been in the works for quite some time. And once it becomes more formalized, we'll certainly announce that. But I know that you were talking about building on the legacy that we've already established and just kind of taking it to that next level, especially with the focus on our youngest folks in our community and kind of building them up, because, as they say, the children are our future. So, I'm curious about. You know, you've been here in this position for a couple weeks. I know you've been very familiar with the center, but now you're in this role. I imagine you've learned a lot more on the inside than perhaps on the outside. So are there things that you can share with folks watching about just how much the center does? Because that was my experience too. I was a reporter before I joined as comms manager, and just blown away by how much we actually do.
I was, the first week when I was sort of shadowing Adrian, I was also asking to talk to people. So Katie Supes and I, our director of programs and research and evaluation, and she actually wrote up a piece for me that was so that I could understand on paper what she was about to tell me and keep track of it. But the reach of our health outreach right now in tobacco, COVID, testing,
Mhm.
and our cultural and community outreach programs, things that are physically happening in the building.
Yeah.
I was not aware of the depth of it, the amount of that activity, but also the reach. I mean, we've got a staff person in Philadelphia that's running some of the outreach. We've got somebody in Pittsburgh. We've got centers from throughout Pennsylvania that are now getting sort of, from our funding, getting sort of mini grants to learn how to do some of the programming that we do. And to me, that speaks volumes to what the center has become.
Yeah.
That we are still a community center. We're very focused on the Valley, but what we're able to deliver is being asked for in terms of modeling from around the state. Our training institute is training people, companies in California, throughout the country, because we can do that virtually.
Yeah, one of the rare benefits of COVID-19.
One of the rare benefits, right. And speaking of that, you know, the other interesting thing about COVID was that some of our program pieces went virtual.
Yes.
I mean, my understanding as I viewed it, the center turned on a dime and could turn it into a virtual world. But then as we've been coming out, we've been able to keep some of those programs hybrid, because we got audiences that didn't live here.
Yes.
And they wanted to stay a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And that to me is very powerful.
I agree.
Very powerful.
Yeah. I know that I'm a member of the Breathe community group, which is focuses on queer spirituality, and we've had community members from Michigan, completely different time zone, joining us. And you know, some of these groups started virtually, and now that, you know, our center is thankfully back open in person, there's still this desire to connect with people who have found us online from wherever in the world they are. So. It's definitely a silver lining to the pandemic and what we're going through. Before we get to some questions that community members have prepared so far, Braden, I want to see if there's anyone who's asked any questions. If not, for those of you who are watching, we encourage you to drop your question in the chat. And once again, if you don't get a chance to do it right now, you can save your question and come back at 3 o'clock on Instagram. You had mentioned that you knew a lot more about the center once you were on the inside. And I think one of the ways that people can learn more from the outside is by getting to know us a little bit more. So our doors are open, so you are welcome to visit us during the week. That's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And of course, online is kind of where we live too. It's our own community center out there in cyberspace. But our social media handles across platforms are BSC Lehigh Valley, and our website is Bradbury-Sullivan-Center.org. All that information and more. I'll admit, even as someone who has a general knowledge of everything, I still have a hard time grasping exactly how much we do.
Right, but also, you know, to Stephen's credit, his communication through social media and through our website about sort of our calendar of events, a weekly newsletter that really lets you see in depth some of the things that are maybe one-offs, like a queer film series showing, or a poetry reading, or those things, you know, you can participate on in terms of one-off. You know, it's not like you have to do the whole series. There may be something that's of particular interest to you. And I know I've been attending some of those things, but not regularly just because of my schedule, but because of the particular poet or reading that we're doing as a group. So, you know, feel free to just pick and choose. It's a menu.
Yes.
And it's a la carte. You can do it as you feel like you want to do it.
And I'll see you tomorrow at Phantom's Pride Night.
Yes!
So exciting. So for those of you who don't know, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms are partnering with our center for their annual Pride Night. And so, you know, we have special seats. We also have some special shirts that we'll be wearing. There's a pregame celebration that blended at 5 and the game's at 7. So if you're out there, please say hello to us. But let's get to these questions, Bill.
Okay.
There's just a few here, so I'm hoping that people start asking some more questions. But first off, I know that you're a lover of arts and culture.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, do you have a favorite book or two? And they don't have to necessarily be queer books, but
Yeah.
maybe a queer book and a non-queer book?
Yeah, well, it happens that, I needed to sort of think through a lot of my reading, but it does happen that my favorite novel so far of the last probably 7 months was by Ocean Yong,
Okay.
who is a young gay writer, first generation Vietnamese. And it's called On Earth, We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And it's a telling of his tale of learning so much through his mother's eyes about his mother and her journey here. And then as a reflection of his own journey as an Asian man in a world that was filled with pushback and an inability to see him, and so he didn't even know what his voice was.
Yeah.
And then coming through that into a discovery of that. It's one of the most poignant, it's almost like reading a poem.
Yeah.
It has that beauty to it. So anyway, that's one of the things that just, it's one of the few novels I'll probably go back and read again.
Oh yeah, you gotta love those kinds.
Because you know you've been in their river,
Yeah.
but you're being moved along, and sometimes you need to
Yeah.
go back and get back in the river and sort of go with them.
Yes.
And then I also really enjoy poetry. So
Okay.
this recently, I've been reading this poet. She's quite elderly, Pulitzer Prize winner, called Mary Oliver, and she writes a lot about the association we have with nature and the connection we have with one another through nature, through the natural world. And it just, anyway. And discovered this year, just recently, our resident poet, Robin Gao.
Yes.
They are, I don't even know how to describe what they present, but let's just say that I read the poetry and then I went to the reading, I went to the discussion group, and that opened up even more, and then Robin came and read, and it's the Our Lady of Perpetual Degeneracy.
Yes.
And we have those on sale here.
Yes, good plug.
But a young poet that is very much will take you into their river.
Yes.
And you're going to go on a journey that you didn't expect to go on.
And Robin has a new book out. It's called A Million Quiet Revolutions. It's also on sale here at the center. That's one of the things I didn't realize about the center is that when you come to the center, yes, we have a community space and library. We also have essentially a bookstore.
Right. Right.
Full of queer memorabilia and books.
Yeah.
We have an art gallery. We have a lot of stuff, and a lot of the the books here are from local folks too. Liz Bradbury and certain a few books.
Yeah.
So there's always something new to check out here, and our exhibits they change out every few months. Lots of great stuff there.
Yeah.
Speaking of queer fabulousness, do you have any LGBTQ plus role models or icons that you want to share with us?
Yeah, and we're coming up on a celebration of a remarkable person that I think it's because generationally I am close in age. They're older than me by a little bit, but was Harvey Milk, who was the first gay politician to be elected in the state of California to the supervisory role of the city of San Francisco. Was elected, had been an avid civil rights, he's really a big part of the whole American civil rights movement, but especially in California and San Francisco in organizing Blacks, Latinos, Asians, and the gay community for the first time. And was elected as the first out gay politician, and was then assassinated by his rival a year later. But I don't know, if you read some of his work, especially some of his speeches, there's a speech that he gave when he was elected called Hope. I would go to that and read it because it is an emblem for even our time. And it still resonates about why a man or a woman stands up and says, now is the time, and I am that person to be part of that time. And that he still
Yeah.
resonates with me. So anyway, Harvey Milk,
Yeah.
May 22nd is Harvey Milk Day. And then a singer that I just, from way back, is Katie Lang,
Yeah.
who just, I think still just stands up and says,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gay, I'm loud,
Yeah.
and I'm proud.
Yep.
And and her music, her lyricism, her
Amazing.
still strikes a huge chord.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We have a community member interested in how to begin the process of becoming a volunteer.
Ooh, volunteer opportunities. Well, as a super volunteer yourself,
Right.
there are plenty of opportunities to get connected, right?
Yeah, and I think probably what you could do is you can go to our website,
Mhm.
and then there's a menu, and there's a drop-down
Mhm.
box for volunteer,
Yeah.
and then you can fill in sort of the information, or I think you can even put in some of the things you're interested in,
Yeah.
and then somebody from the center will contact you immediately.
Yes.
Because we're always after volunteers.
Yes, especially as we get into Pride
Season, yeah.
Which information about Pride is coming soon. Can't share exactly what it is, but please be on the lookout on social media. So, really direct information for you who's asking about the volunteer. The
Yeah.
website to go to is Bradbury-Sullivan-Center.org/volunteer. It'll take you to the form that Bill's talking about, and you can share your information that way. And yes, someone will absolutely get in touch with you. And once we announce Pride information, that is certainly a direct opportunity to volunteer, because we're going to need a lot of volunteers.
Yeah, and I mean it's such a grand celebration, and this year is going to be even louder
Yes.
and prouder than ever before.
Yes. Without giving away too much,
Right.
it's going to be another exciting event. Save the date information will be coming out, as well as headliners, grand marshals, the website, all that good stuff is coming down the pipeline very shortly. But unless there's any more questions.
There was just a follow-up, a bit of a comment of wanting to see more intergenerational programming. So I didn't know if we wanted to plug something about the archive or
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yes, I would like to speak to that, because Stephen has had an idea about doing sort of a listening tour, and I've been thinking about this intergenerational piece too, because my generation, which was at the beginning of the movement, we all some of us stepped back because we started professions and we became, I think, more normalized and integrated into just work. And I think that took us away from it. But young people, especially being here and seeing how young people are so engaged in the movement still. And I think there's be a lot to be learned through understanding what the cross-sections of that could be. So we could learn from one another. And we've talked about doing a listening tour with various constituencies. And one of them I've talked to Stephen about is, my generation and this generation under me, a couple generations, but that we find a way to form that interaction or that intersection again. I think it'd be very valuable.
I love that. And yes, to your point, so we are, in addition to having these wonderful conversations online, we're bringing Bill to the community, to all of you. So we're working on a series of meet and greets over the next month or two, where you can get to chat with Bill in person, get to know a little bit more about him outside of the center, and share your concerns, things that you think would be helpful for the center, very helpful information like that intergenerational possibility. We want to hear from you. We encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity, and we'll share more information about that in the coming weeks. But that is something that we're looking forward to, and we'll do the same type of thing with the new executive director as well. One of the questions that you may have is, well, how long are you here? So I will answer that for you, because I don't think you know the answer to that either.
Right.
So what we can share is that, yes, the center is very much in the search for a new executive director. We certainly appreciate the legacy that Adrian Schenker has left the center, and so it's a very intentional search that could take some time. So we don't know how long that will be. When we do have some tangible information to share, we will. But please know that we are on the look for our new director. But in the meantime, we are celebrating Bill and really thankful for the work that he's putting in, coming out of retirement to lead all of us as we lead the state, really. So thank you, Bill, for this conversation.
Thank you,
Once
Steve.
again, we will be back at 3 p.m. If you've got questions, save them up and ask them then. But we'll see you soon.
Thank you.